Hello and welcome to our Facebook Live. We're here at Avon HarperCollins HQ. My name is Claire Frost and I work for Fabulous magazine, which you can get every week with The Sun on Sunday. And I am delighted that I am here with Sunday Times best-selling author C.L. Taylor. Welcome, Callie.
Thank you, Claire.
So Callie is the author of 5 best-selling psychological thrillers, which started in 2014 with The Accident and most recently, just a few weeks ago, with The Fear. Yeah. So Callie, tell us a little bit about The Fear.
Right, The Fear is it's a story of a woman who, when she was 14, she ran away to France with her 31-year-old teacher. And the story hit the news, and she managed to make it back to the UK. But the fear is primarily set 18 years later, when she returns to her hometown, and she decides, well, she sees something that sparks her into action to confront him. And I can't really say more than that without giving too much away.
That was a definite no spoilers intro to the book.
Yeah.
So as you said, it's kind of set this girl going away with her teacher. So in terms of the idea for the book, obviously there have been a few kind of well-known of these news stories. Did it kind of start from reading stuff in the newspaper or seeing a news report on TV?
It started because without wanting to give you too much away, but it does a little bit, I'm a huge fan of the book The Collector by Fowles. And that is a book where a man is in control of a situation. Anybody who's read the book, that's now probably a bit of a spoiler. But I wanted to reverse the sort of typical man in charge, woman as victim thing. And I wanted a woman to take control and sort of have the man almost at her mercy and a bit vulnerable. And that's where I started. And originally I thought that I would approach it by having a woman approach the man that she thought killed her sister when they were teenagers. Okay. But there's a lot of books about sisters and disappearing and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, no, I want to do something completely different that, as far as I know, hasn't been done. So it just popped into my head. What if the man she confronts is actually the man that groomed her when she was a teenager? Now, obviously, the immediate thing that jumped into my head was the very well-known news story from several years ago, where a teacher and his pupil ran off to France together. And I think we can all remember those CCTV images from the ferry. They're just so vivid. And I just thought, wow, that's fascinating. Not so much how he went about grooming her and how their relationship developed, although I do find that really interesting too. And it is touched on in the book, her emotions towards him and how he does infiltrate into her life. But also, when I saw that news story, I thought, how will that woman feel now? How will she feel in 20 years' time? Because our first loves are so instrumental in a way in kind of shaping our view of men and shaping our view of future relationships. So would she hold that relationship up as my great love and anything else seems less passionate? Or would she have horrible feelings about it and feel, he ruined me. I wish I'd never met him. So I kind of projected from the news story what might happen in the future, and then obviously ramped it up a whole load more for fiction.
Always ramping it up for fiction. The book goes to quite a lot of dark places. I mean, already, just talking about it deals with quite dark themes and goes even darker.
Yeah.
How is that sitting down to write that kind of book?
Yeah, I've been asked this a few times and I don't know quite how to answer it, because I just have to. I don't think that I am a particularly graphic author. I don't go into details, but I think possibly by me kind of initiating a scene and then ending it, a lot of the darkness goes on in the reader's mind. So I kind of go part way, and then I think the reader goes the rest of the way in their mind.
I think you're right, and I think that's a very clever thing to do. It's basically that chapter ending, da da da, and your heart. Like, I know that when I've read all of your books, my heart pumps at like a million miles an hour the whole time you're reading. You're like, oh, I need to know what's happened. But so when you're writing it, you're not feeling in that kind of state of mind. You're kind of
I do. This is the reason that that writing these types of books is very emotionally exhausting, because I do put myself into the minds of my characters, so whoever the point of view character is. So if I'm writing somebody like Wendy, that's almost quite fun, because she's got quite a dark sense of humour, and she's quite sort of almost a bit eccentric. But writing Chloe and writing Lou was hard, because I had to re-become a teenager, and not just a teenager, but a really vulnerable teenager. I had to imagine I was in love with an older man, and it is quite difficult. But I always listen to soundtracks when I'm writing, and I'd match the soundtrack to the mood that I want to evoke. So I often listen to the In Time soundtrack from the sci-fi film, but actually it's dark, and Arrival, and they get me into the mood, and I kind of, when I'm writing, I almost just get kind of swept away. Really, I am the character. I'm living the character, and it's dark and scary, and
that must be exhausting, though, especially day after day, just in this situation where you're like, okay, what would I do next, or how would this character, get out of this awful situation, or would they create even more, go to an even darker place?
Yeah.
So how do you, when do you have a kind of cut-off time when you stop writing that day and then go, okay, real world, I'll go and watch some soaps? Or do you have to kind of have that relaxation time?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I guess for me is that I have to do the school pickup. So my writing day normally ends at 3 o'clock, and then I have to go and pick my son up. Sometimes he's at after school club, and I pick him up at 5 instead. But then it is very much back in real life, and stepping out the front door to go and do the school run, I'm able to just sort of throw all of the stuff behind me mostly, and just go back into mum mode, not author mode. But sometimes I do go to hotels and writing retreats, and then it becomes really intense, because there's almost no escape. Obviously, if you go to a writing retreat, you have meals with other writers, which helps lift you out of that mood. But just recently, writing the book I'm writing now, I went to a hotel for 2.5 days. And it's pretty much full on 48 hours thinking about the characters. And if you're writing quite dark stuff, I'd take myself off to the gym in that case. But I do watch a lot of terrible reality telly to lift my mood. And, I couldn't go from writing something really dark to then watching something really dark. It's got to be frivolous and light, and then I could just sort of cast those dark thoughts away.
I mean, it still sounds extremely full on, especially as you say, when you go away and do it for 2.5 days. Yeah. By the end of that, you must be like, I just have to watch Queer Eye back to back. Yeah. Like, that's it.
Exactly. It does get too much if I do it intensely.
So where did this darkness come from? So you began your career writing romantic comedy novels. Yeah. So what led you down this dark path?
Well, I think it was always there, the kind of dark side, because I started off writing short stories, and I really experimented. I think I was kind of finding my sort of author voice and finding the style, because I was never quite sure what kind of book I wanted to write. And so I wrote some kind of sort of light, feel-good short stories, and I still write those sometimes, for women's magazines and stuff. And then I wrote some quite sort of abstract, absurd things, and then I wrote some dark things. And the dark stuff was there, but then I decided to write a rom-com, because I had an idea itching at me, and that it wouldn't go away. So I wrote it, and the first rom-com was very light. Then the second rom-com, actually, I found myself putting quite dark histories into 2 of the characters. And in the type of rom-com I wrote, that was not right, And my editor at the time actually said to me, this is too dark for a rom-com. You need to take this out. You can't have... And I think it was just always there in me, kind of...
Always trying to come out.
Needling to come out. And I was just like, no, I'm writing happy, funny stuff with, feel-good endings. So it was always there, so...
But I feel like you were very much ahead of the curve. So you published The Accident in 2014, and The Girl on the Train, which obviously everyone knows is a huge success, that was published at the beginning of 2015.
Yeah.
So you were already out there doing what you do. You're like, yeah, I'm on this. How did that feel? Do you feel like you were kind of ahead of the curve, or were you just writing what you felt naturally you wanted to write?
Well, I actually had the idea for The Accident, the first one, when I was on maternity leave in 2011. And while I was pushing my son around in the pram trying to get him to sleep, I actually listened to the audiobook of Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson.
Brilliant book.
And that book became a phenomenon. And I also read Into the Darkest Corner by Elizabeth Haynes. Both books absolutely blew me away. And it was almost like I'd found my right niche because, the rom-coms were too light. Crime I had always thought of as police procedurals or detectives or hard-boiled, and I thought, I can't write that. But psychological thrillers sat in the middle of women's fiction and crime in a very accessible way, because I didn't want to write about police procedurals or detectives. I wanted to write about people who are sort of the victims of crimes or subtle manipulations and and that sort of thing. And because I'd seen these books do really well by S.J. Watson and Elizabeth Haynes, I kind of suspected that we were on the verge of a massive boom in popularity of this kind of genre. So I said to my agent, I've had this idea for a psychological thriller. What do you think? And she said, just write it, because I'd finished my 2-book rom-com contract. So I just wrote it on maternity leave. And then she said to me, when she read it, this is the best thing you've ever written.
Amazing. That's always what you want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I do feel very, very lucky that I kind of, I wasn't the first by a long shot, but I was sort of in the sort of second wave, I think. And I kind of do feel for psychological thriller authors now who are trying to break into the market, because there are so many now.
Yeah, there are so many, and I think you have to really stand above all of them, if you're going to get noticed. Whereas, and your books automatically do that anyway, but now you've also got your, you've made your name in that. And I'm always very interested that you published under C.L. Taylor rather than your Christian name. Was that because you'd written rom-com, or was there a, well, we don't know if it's a man or a woman? Was that there?
I think, well, the official answer is that it was because my rom-coms were published as Callie Taylor. And Avon wanted to distinguish these as different books, because they couldn't be more different. The C.L. Taylor thing, I guess, at the time there was, S.J. Watson, and that nobody knew if he was a man or a woman and that sort of thing. And I do think that branding me as C.L. Taylor, certainly back then, did help me get more male readers and the black covers and everything. And now I kind of get as many letters and emails from men as I do from women, so there are definitely lots of men reading my books. And I think probably, I don't know if this is true or not, but like Sharon Bolton, she was S.J. Bolton for a long time, and I don't know why, but I assume for a similar kind of reason. But now she can happily sell her books as Sharon, and it's not seen as an issue for a man to buy a crime book with a woman's name on the front, because there are loads of brilliant women writing crime.
And, that can only be a good thing, definitely. But as you say, now you're very much C.L. Taylor. There'd be kind of, it's not like you're ever trying to hide the fact that you're Callie Taylor and but that you've got your brand now. So, why would you move away from that?
I'm still proud of my rom-coms, for what they were. I think they're okay.
Absolutely. And I think also it's about writing to your genre as well.
Yeah.
Like, they were rom-coms and this psychological thriller. They're two very different things.
Yeah.
But they can still all be validly great books.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
We had a question from Penny on Twitter, and she wanted to know if you always knew what the ending of The Fear was going to be, or did you start off with a different ending and change it along the way?
Yeah, let me think. Yes, originally I had in my head that this is going to be really tricky in case anybody's not read it yet. That somebody who performs an action at the end was going to be a different character doing that.
Okay.
I can't say much more than that.
Talking riddles.
Yeah, sorry. And then the very last bit, the very last chapter, I did not know that at all at the beginning. I got to 85,000 words through the first draft, and then I think I was in the shower, and I just thought, oh, I could have this. I could have this at the end. And I just thought, does that work? Does it not? And so I asked my editor, and she said, yeah, you've got to put that in. It's great. So I put that in, and then I went through and sort of rewrote and tweaked a few bits earlier on.
And how important do you think twists are to psychological thrillers? Because we hear so much about, oh, there's a twist. Oh, did you guess it? Did it?
Yeah.
How much are you thinking about that when you're writing?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I don't think psychological thrillers necessarily had to have a twist or have to have a twist. But I did a poll on my Facebook page recently, and I asked my readers, do psychological thrillers have to have a twist at the end? And I can't remember the exact figures, but I think it was 84% said yes.
That's interesting.
And at the time I was plotting the new book, and I was like, right, so I'm going to have to have
a twist.
I have to have a twist. But the thing is that's frustrating about that is that if the reader expects there to be a twist at the end, are they reading and enjoying the book, or are they reading the book trying to anticipate what the twist is? And I don't mind as long as you read and enjoy the book either way. But the book has to be more than the twist. And in the fear, what was particularly important to me was that the characters felt vibrant and real and well-rounded, and that the readers felt emotions, and if they felt scared or dark or heart beating fast or whatever it was, the twist is almost like a bonus, I think. I almost invariably spot twists in other writers' books because we know how they are formulated. It's a bit like being a magician, behind the scenes,
Yeah.
But I think it's very hard for psychological thrillers authors at the moment because there are only so many twists, and you don't want to disappoint the reader, but you can't be too outlandish either.
Yeah.
So it's probably at least one of the hardest parts of writing a psychological thriller is to have a twist that's not guessable, but it's not too over the top. It's a fine balance.
Yeah, good luck with that. I think you're right. I think it's reader expectation as well, isn't it? And also, if you've written a book that has a twist, then your next one, there's that expectation.
Yeah.
And generally with psychological thrillers, and I know when I'm reading them myself, that you sometimes can just be reading them thinking, when's the twist? Am I going to guess it?
Yeah.
And although that's still enjoying the book, it is a different way of reading it. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I was interested to, you were talking about characters and how you wanted them to be well-rounded. And we had a question from Jen on Facebook, and she asked if you base your characters on real-life people that you know.
Of course I don't. I think, funny enough, I was talking to, on the train on the way up here, I was talking to a blogger, and she was kind of asking me the same thing. And I said I would never, ever base a character on a person in their entirety, because the fun of being an author is dreaming up your characters and their quirks and what their fears are, what their desires are, what their past is, all that sort of thing. But I do lift little bits and bobs. I've had a friend say to me, oh, that character doesn't like coriander. You got that off me.
Me.
Yeah, exactly. And my partner, bless him, has a few little habits that may have made it into my books. Not a whole character, but just like a few. I do. You're a human magpie when you're a writer. And you will spot little, this is going to scare anybody who knows me now, but you do pick up on little behaviours and quirks and of everybody and they do appear in a book somewhere probably. And then, of course, there's quite a lot of me.
Yeah.
Whether it's my, even if it's my bad guy, there must be some darkness within me that I'm drawing on or projecting, or I don't know. And then a little bit of me in my heroines and the supporting cast, because you draw from your experience, your life, what you see, and So no,
No,
I
not
don't
at all.
base it on
No.
any actual people. No.
That must be quite hard though, when you're writing dark books, to then have those quirks and characteristics of, as you talked about, that was interesting that you talked about of yourself in there,
Yeah.
which is all well and good when you're writing rom-com.
Yeah.
When you're then writing those, dark kind of, psychological thrillers, that's an interesting.
Yeah, that I've kind of explored that, particularly in my first 3 books. That the hardest book that was to write for me emotionally was The Missing, because I sort of based that on one of my worst fears, which is, of anything happening to my son. And in The Missing, Claire's son goes missing as a teenager, age 16. So I had to draw on I had to make myself sort of imagine how I would feel if I was in that situation, that my son was missing. And that's extraordinarily painful to do, because that's not somewhere you want to go in your mind. Fortunately, there are other characters where I draw on bits of myself where it's not quite so torturous. So, somebody said on Twitter the other day, "Oh my gosh, Wendy on page whatever of The Fear reminds me of me." And I said, "Oh, is it the bit where she writes down 1 custard cream, Slimming World, 3 sins, and then eats the rest of the packet?" And she said, "Yes." And I was like, "Yes, well, me too." That's where that, that's where that comes from, or being unable to sort of stay off Facebook for more than, 10 minutes at a time before you're drawn back in again. There are bits of me that make it in a slightly less dark way as well.
I'm interested that you've written rom-com, you obviously write psychological thrillers, but you've also written a young adult book. It's like you're all genres here. How did that
Sci-fi
come
next.
about? So there was The Treatment, which was published last October.
Yeah, it's the same thing that kind of drove me to write Heaven Can Wait, the first rom-com, The Accident, the first psych thriller. It was just an idea that popped into my head and I couldn't get rid of it. I wanted to kind of draw on how it feels to be 15 and to feel like you've got no control of your life, because you're always being told what to do by your parents or your teachers, or, and then I took it a step further. What if you're being controlled by the government? And I love a dystopian book, and the Treatment's not a dystopian, it's a thriller, but it has a slightly, sort of alternative present,
One that's kind of too believable in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And I just this character kind of popped into my head, and I love psychology. I did my degree in psychology, so I'm fascinated by things like conditioning and Pavlov's dogs and brainwashing and mind control and all these kind of things. And I've explored sort of brainwashing and mind control in The Lie, which is about a cult. But this book was sort of different, and I was a big fan of Prison Break. I watch all the classy programmes, and I thought, what would it be like if you had a bunch of teenagers in a prison type environment? How would they try and escape in a different way from how adults would? So all of these things kind of came together into this idea, and I was just itching to write it. And I said to my agent, even if I just write one YA book in my career, I would love to see this one get published. And fortunately, I got a deal with HarperCollins HQ. So that's out, and I have another one that I need to write.
In the same series?
No, it won't be actually.
Okay,
it's going to be a standalone. But yeah, I haven't had time to start it yet.
Well, you've been writing a few other books just along the way.
But I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it sounds exciting, especially as I really loved The Treatment. I thought it was great, and because I thought it was it's basically a psychological thriller in lots of ways, but just in basically with teenagers at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And I think adults and teens can read that and really enjoy it and get lots out of it. So
Thank you.
It was a win-win, really. What do you think the best thing about being an author is?
Oh, there's loads. I often say it's like holding your book in your hands for the first time, because a whole year of work goes into each book, and so much angst and emotion and all of this, and self-doubt and everything. So to hold it in your hands at the end is incredibly special. But it would mean nothing if you were published in a vacuum. You know, the book came out and then you didn't get any reaction, you didn't hear anything. What really touches me is when I get emails and messages from people who will either say, I was never a very big reader, and then I picked up one of your books and now I can't stop reading.
It's amazing
That
to
is
hear that.
such an honour to have that. Or people who say, I'm having a difficult time in my life and your book helped, you know, entertain me or distract me, or I'm in hospital, or my daughter's a reluctant reader and I gave her one of your books and now she just wants to keep. It's that kind of thing that is the best thing about being an author, absolutely.
Do you think you write your books for you or for readers?
Ooh, I don't set out to write them for readers. I'm kind of aware of who my readers are, I think, and what they expect from one of my books, and I do kind of learn from the feedback that I get on my books, because I think you always have to progress as an author. Yeah. So you have to listen to the sort of feedback that you get, and sort of correct your weak spots and that sort of thing. But to spend as long as I do, to spend a year on a book, it has to be something that interests me. So normally it's like the theme that kind of resonates with me. So whether or not it's about, you know, guilt, which is like a big theme of the fear part, a big reason that Lou acts the way she does is the fact that she feels guilty for something that happened in the past, and she wants to put things right by acting. And then in the book that I'm writing now, it's probably, the theme is probably about self-forgiveness, for something else. I can't talk about that at the moment. But so something with the book will always resonate with me, and I kind of, by writing it, I kind of work through it, as well as just providing an entertaining read, or, you know, a page turner or whatever.
And as you say, you've got to write that for a year.
Yeah.
So you've got to love what you're writing.
Yeah,
otherwise,
exactly.
You know.
Yeah, I could never sort of, you know, if somebody said, oh, you know, the next big thing is this, you need to write one of those. I couldn't do that. I have to write books that chime with me, that mean something to me.
If someone out there watching this is a budding writer and their dream is to have their book in their hand, published, as you were talking about, what advice would you give them?
Persevere is the main thing. I think to be a writer, you obviously need to be talented, but you can start off with, you know, a kernel of talent and grow that. And the more that you write and the more that you experiment, the better that you'll become. I bought a lot of how to write books, and, you know, some of them weren't brilliant, but some of them are absolute gold dust. And I've got a list on my website. If you scroll through all of my news back to September 2016, I think, there is a list of the ones that I recommend, and I still use them now. I use a lot of screenwriting books, and if I'm having trouble with my plot, I'll look at these screenwriting books, and then I'll understand, that's, you know, whatever. So learn, study the books that you admire, and work out how they get that effect, you know, whether it makes you cry or it makes you turn the page or it makes you terrified or the character is well rounded. Study other writers that you admire, and unfortunately grow a thick skin, because there's a lot of rejection and criticism in this business. You know, the criticism largely comes from online reviewers, unfortunately, but the rejection happens, you know, all the time. You know, you will get rejected when you apply for an agent. I got rejected 5 times before I get my agent. I got rejected by countless publishers before I got my publisher. It hurts, and the irony is, to be a writer you need to be thin-skinned to access your emotions and to empathise, but you need thick skin to deal with it. And, you know, over the years that I've been writing, I've seen a lot of writers fall by the wayside because they couldn't deal with the rejection, or they didn't have. They were too fearful to even send their book out in the first place. And I think that's one of the saddest things, because you don't know. You don't know. It could be.
When you're writing, it's very personal. It's quite an insular activity.
Yeah.
You're sitting on your own, tapping away at your computer,
Yeah.
not knowing whether what you're writing is good or bad. Do you still have that kind of slight worry when you're writing a book, like, actually, is this utter rubbish, or actually, is this the best thing I've ever written?
Every book. I don't think you will find a writer alive today who does not get at some point in the first draft stage and think, this is rubbish. You know, imposter syndrome is real and living amongst all the writers in the world, because you just think, no, this is the book where everybody realises that actually I don't know what I'm doing, you know, and I get slated across the board for it. It's totally normal, particularly in a first draft. You know, you're feeling your way through it, and you will have those moments of self-doubt, and that is when a lot of people stop. You know, who are writing their first novel, they'll start with a burst of enthusiasm. Yeah. They'll get to about 25, 30,000 words, and they'll go, oh, that's not very good. I'll start a new idea,
and then never ever
finish one. You just have to plough through, and don't worry if it's rubbish. You know, when you get to the end, that's when you turn it into a book. You go back, you reread it, you restructure it, you add new things, you cut things, you polish it. You know. You check the tension.
100,000 words.
There has to be something there, you know, in the first place. So you've just got to get through that self-doubt. That self-doubt, unfortunately, is not going to go away. Doesn't matter how many books you sell or how successful you are. I'm fairly certain all writers, certainly most of the ones I've met, are riddled with self-doubt.
Good. As a final question, Ellen on Instagram wanted to know if you can tell us what you're working on next, because you gave us a small hint just before, but is there any more you can tell us?
Yeah, this is always a tricky one, because I'm quite superstitious about talking about books while I'm still writing them, and I am halfway through, so, you know, still a fair whack to do. But I can say that it is called Sleep, that it is my first hardback, and it'll be out on the 10th of January.
Oh my goodness, already got a pub date for it.
I know, isn't that amazing?
Now you have to actually write it.
I'm writing it, and it's like pre-order on Amazon and stuff. What can I say? It is set on the Isle of Rum off the coast of Scotland. And it's set in a hotel, and there's a big storm, and I'm not going to tell you any more than that.
We can't wait to read it. Oh, and you're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to write it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've still got the twist waiting for me at the end. I'm like, am I going to go with that twist, or I'm actually hoping I have got a twist. I'm working towards a twist, but a double twist would be lovely. I'm just hoping that if I just keep writing, something else will occur. But don't hold me to it.
Okay, we're all watching for that double twist.
One twist is hard enough.
Callie, it's been an absolute joy chatting to you. Thank you so much. And if everyone out there listening and watching has loved hearing everything that Callie's got to say, you should buy some tickets to our Fab Night In event that we're having, where Callie will be on a panel with me and Sarah Pimborough and B.A. Paris and Adele Parks. And that will be at Fabulous HQ right here. And you can get your tickets at thesun.co.uk/Fab Night In. See you there.